Back at E3 2014, Microsoft gave us our first glimpse at Cuphead, and a lot of people, myself included, immediately fell in love with the game's unique art direction, which really captured the look and feel of old school 1930s cartoons. And ever since that E3, I've been waiting year after year for this game to finally get released after pushback and pushback. And Microsoft was awesome enough to actually send me a review code for this game, so I just could not resist and had to do a dedicated video on it, because thankfully, this game did not disappoint at all. Now obviously there are going to be some minor spoilers in this video, but I'm going to focus mostly on just showing boss battles from about roughly the first third of the game, so there is a whole lot more to it than what you're going to see right here, but this gives you a good general idea of how it actually plays. Now before we get into gameplay, the first thing I want to talk about is how well this game knocked it out of the park with capturing that old school aesthetic of old cartoons. Now some of this is fairly obvious, for instance the visuals. I mean, you can see the hand-drawn characters, hand-drawn backgrounds, that kind of film grain effect and the dust and dirt that goes on the screen, just like an old cartoon. But there's a lot more to it than just that. There's also sort of an audio component to it, where all the sound of the game has this very kind of muffled, warm feeling to it. It's just enough to where you can understand what people are saying, but at the same time, it definitely has that kind of dirty, realistic feeling that those old cartoons had. But what really impressed me was the game's approach to frame rate. Now, obviously for an action-intensive game like this, it makes a lot of sense for it to be 60 FPS, which it is. But that's not exactly true to kind of actual film experiences, which are 24. But what they ended up doing was, everything that's very clearly in 60 FPS is stuff that is important for gameplay. Cuphead himself, the projectiles you shoot, projectiles you have to dodge. But everything else, the backgrounds, characters, everything that's moving around on the screen, while it is technically in 60, it's all designed to look like it's actually running at 24, which gives this really much more true film effect. Now this does create a little bit of a dissonance between, your character moving around and everything else around him, but you're so focused on the action most of the time, and it just looks so good despite that fact that it's never really an issue. Now I don't want to go in depth on the game's story, I'll let you guys actually find that out for yourselves if you play it, but just to kind of give you a basic general idea, it's fairly minimal, but just like with the visuals and audio, this is very intentional. It's very true to the kind of style of these old cartoons. More than anything, it's just this odd mixture of kind of fun, silly stuff, but then also kind of surreal and weird and oddly dark and adult. It just all works so well. Now, as for the actual gameplay, Cuphead is a run-and-gun shooter very much along the lines of, think of Mega Man, but instead of focusing on traditional levels that are then followed with a boss fight, it's instead focused on just being a boss rush mode the whole way through. You're fighting boss after boss after boss, with just a couple more traditional platforming levels thrown in the middle, which mainly act as ways to give you a little practice and ways to save up gold to buy new abilities that might make certain bosses a little easier. Which you will need, because this game is frickin' hard. Just like the old school retro games that it's emulating gameplay-wise, it also uses a lot of old school game decisions for its difficulty. There are no checkpoints in a boss fight. If you die near the end, you will be sent back all the way to the beginning. There is no way to recover health. What you have at the start is what you have the whole way through, and you just have to do your best to learn all the enemies' different gimmicks to avoid taking damage and take them down little by little over time. And it is such a great feeling when you actually beat a boss in this game. There's just something so great about the idea of spending a whole hour tackling one level over and over and over again, and when you actually do it right, it actually only takes about 2 minutes. I mean, really, pure content-wise, this game is maybe only about an hour and 20 minutes if you do everything perfectly, but in reality, you're probably gonna spend at least 8, if not 10 or 12 hours, depending on your skill level. Now, Cuphead does also offer a co-op mode, which you might think, oh yeah, I'll just use that if I want to try and get through it easier. Not really the case. Unlike other co-op games where normally bosses are just compensated to have a little extra health because you have double the firepower, Cuphead I think also puts into account the fact that you not only have double the firepower, but you can also keep each other alive by reviving your teammates. So enemies end up having tons of health when you're a co-op, which keeps that same satisfying level of difficulty even if you're going with a friend, and hopefully you're playing with someone that's actually really good, otherwise you probably will stop talking to them. So far this has pretty much been non-stop praise for me. There's gotta be some downsides to this game, right? Honestly, not really, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, my only real complaint after finishing the game is that the difficulty curve does feel like it's a little all over the place. There are some boss fights during World 2 that I had a lot more problems with than I did in World 3 and vice versa, but honestly, considering how relatively short the game is and how difficult it is the whole way through, that isn't really that big of a deal. Really, Cuphead to me is another example of something we've been seeing a lot of this year. We have these games that are technically indie in their scope, they're indie studios, but they have the financial backing of major companies, other games like Pyre and Hellblade, where it's this very focused experience and the game knows exactly what kind of game it wants to be. It's not a AAA title where they're taking this kitchen sink approach, trying to make sure it has everything that's buzzword, make sure it's open world, make sure there's RPG elements, add this and this and that. Instead, they just know what kind of game they wanted Cuphead to be and made exactly that. And for 20 bucks, it is frickin' great.